Dominic Caruso was sitting alone in his penthouse on the 40th floor when the city below him lit up like a sea of fireflies. He had everything: the power, the money, the fear in men's eyes when they heard his name. Chicago bowed to him. Rivals disappeared at his command. His word was law in places where the actual law dared not tread. But that night, like every night for the past 2 years, he sat in silence. No laughter, no footsteps, no small voice calling out for him, just emptiness dressed in Italian marble and designer furniture. He was 37 years old. He had built an empire from blood and ashes. He had made grown men beg for mercy, and he had never once heard anyone call him dad. The next morning, Dominic walked into the Black Rose before dawn. His club, his kingdom, the place where deals were made and debts were paid. But that morning, he heard something that stopped him cold. A woman crying. Elena Santos, the night shift cleaning lady. She stood in the hallway with her back to him, phone pressed against her ear, shoulders trembling like a leaf in a storm. Please, I'm begging you. She's only 6 years old. She doesn't understand why every other kid has a daddy at the Father's Day party and she doesn't. Silence on the other end. Just show up. 1 hour. That's all she's asking. That's all I'm asking. Please, Marcus. She drew a picture of you. She's been practicing what to say when she introduces you to her teacher. More silence. Then a click. The line went dead. Elena didn't know Dominic was standing there. She didn't know anyone could hear when she whispered to herself, voice cracking like thin ice over a frozen river. My baby just wants a daddy. Just one day. Is that too much to ask? Those words hit Dominic like a bullet to the chest. He had ordered men killed without flinching. He had watched empires crumble and never lost a minute of sleep. But standing in that doorway, listening to a stranger's heartbreak, something inside him shattered. Because he understood what it meant to want something so desperately that it hollowed you out from the inside. He understood the silence of an empty home. He understood the ache of a dream that would never come true. And in that moment, the most feared man in Chicago made a decision that would change everything. Dominic stood there for a few more seconds, then stepped out of the shadows. Elena spun around, her tear-streaked face going pale the moment she saw him. Her phone slipped from her fingers and clattered against the floor. She scrambled to pick it up, her hands shaking so badly that she dropped it twice before finally clutching it to her chest. Mr. Caruso, I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't be using my phone during work hours. It won't happen again. Please, I need this job. I can't afford to. Stop. The single word cut through her, rambling like a blade. Elena's mouth snapped shut. She stood frozen, waiting for the axe to fall. Everyone in Chicago knew what happened to people who disappointed Dominic Caruso. They disappeared. They became whispers. They became warnings. But Dominic didn't move. He just stood there, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. His dark eyes held something she hadn't expected. Not anger, not annoyance, something else entirely. The man on the phone, he said quietly. Who is he? Elena swallowed hard. Her throat felt like sandpaper. He's nobody. Just someone I used to know. He's your daughter's father. It wasn't a question. Elena's face crumbled. The shame she had been holding back flooded her features, turning her cheeks red, making her eyes shine with fresh tears. I heard everything, Dominic continued. His voice was flat, matter of fact, but there was no cruelty in it. The party, the picture she drew, all of it. Elena wanted to disappear. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. Of all the people in the world to witness her humiliation, it had to be him, the most powerful man in Chicago. The man who could end her with a single phone call. Please, she whispered, please don't fire me. My daughter, she depends on me. I'm all she has. I'll work double shifts. I'll clean every inch of this place with a toothbrush if that's what you want. Just please. When is the party? Elena blinked. The question was so unexpected that she forgot to breathe for a moment. What? The Father's Day party? At the school? When is it? Saturday, she heard herself say. This Saturday. 2 in the afternoon. Dominic nodded slowly. He slid his hands into the pockets of his perfectly tailored suit and leaned against the doorframe. The casual posture looked almost absurd on a man known for his rigid control, his cold precision. I'll go. Elena stared at him. Surely she had misheard. Surely the exhaustion and the crying had scrambled her brain. I'm sorry. What? I'll go to the party. His voice was steady, as if he were discussing a business transaction. I'll be her father. Just for one day. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena's mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, 1,000 hidden motives. Men like Dominic Caruso didn't do favors. They collected debts. They exploited weaknesses. They took and took and took until there was nothing left. Why? The word came out sharper than she intended. Why would you do that? Dominic's jaw tightened. For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Pain. Old, buried, festering pain. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that impenetrable mask he always wore. Because I know what it's like, he said quietly, to want something you can never have. Elena shook her head. This had to be a trick, a game. Rich men like him didn't understand people like her. They didn't understand the desperate scramble to keep food on the table, the shame of watching your child ask questions you couldn't answer. Mr. Caruso, with all due respect, you don't know anything about my life. You don't know my daughter. You don't. You're right. He cut her off, but gently this time. I don't know your daughter, but I know she deserves to have someone show up for her. Even if it's just once. Even if it's a stranger. Elena's breath caught. There was something raw in his voice. Something that didn't match the monster the world believed him to be. But she had been fooled before. She had trusted Marcus. She had believed his promises. And look where that had gotten her. I can't, she whispered. I can't let you do this. I don't even know what you want in return. Dominic pushed himself off the doorframe. He took a single step toward her, close enough that she could smell the expensive cologne, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I don't want anything from you, he said. I just want to know what it feels like, to be someone's father, even if it's only for a few hours. Elena stared at him, searching for the lie, the hidden agenda. But all she found was a hollow emptiness that mirrored her own. Still, she couldn't accept. She wouldn't. You? Dominic Caruso? At a school party? With my daughter? Her voice trembled, caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. What do you really want from me? Elena's question hung in the air between them, sharp and bitter. Dominic didn't answer right away. He simply waited, giving her space to breathe, to think, to decide whether she wanted to fill the silence or let it swallow them both. Elena chose to fill it. You want to know what I really think? Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out anyway. I think men like you don't do anything without expecting something in return. I think you see a desperate woman and you think you can take advantage of her. You think I'm like him. The words stopped her cold. Dominic's voice was quiet, almost gentle, but there was an edge to it, an understanding that went deeper than she expected. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena said, but the lie tasted sour on her tongue. The man on the phone. Marcus. Dominic tilted his head slightly, studying her. He left you, didn't he? When you needed him most. Elena's eyes burned. She hated crying in front of anyone, but especially in front of him. She hated how weak it made her look, how vulnerable. He left when I was 4 months pregnant, she heard herself say. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, like water breaking through a cracked dam. Told me he wasn't ready to be a father. Told me I was on my own, and I have been. For 6 years. She laughed bitterly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I work 3 jobs, Mr. Caruso. 3. I clean your club at night. I work at a laundromat during the day, and on weekends, I pick up shifts at a diner across town. I haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in years. And you know what? I've never once asked anyone for help, because every time I trusted someone, every time I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, things would get easier, they let me down. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much disappointment. So forgive me if I don't believe that Dominic Caruso, the man who makes people disappear, suddenly wants to play daddy at a school party out of the goodness of his heart. Dominic listened without interrupting. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He just let her words wash over him, absorbing every ounce of her pain and distrust. When she finally fell silent, chest heaving, he spoke. I was married once. Elena blinked. Whatever she had expected him to say, it wasn't that. Her name was Victoria. Dominic continued. His voice was flat, detached, as if he were telling someone else's story. Beautiful, smart, everything a man could want. We were together for 5 years, and for 5 years, I told myself that she would change her mind, that eventually she would want what I wanted. He paused, his jaw tightening. Children, a family, something real, something that mattered more than money or power or fear. Elena watched him, her defenses wavering despite herself. She never changed her mind, Dominic said quietly. She told me that children would ruin her life, that she had no interest in being a mother, and when I said I couldn't live without that dream, he shrugged, a small, defeated gesture. She chose her freedom over me. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken grief. I have everything, Dominic said, meeting Elena's eyes. Everything a man is supposed to want. Money, power, respect. But I have never once heard a child call me dad. I have never once felt what it's like to matter to someone in that way. He took a breath, steadying himself. So, when I heard you on that phone, begging that man to show up for his own daughter, I wasn't thinking about taking advantage of you. I was thinking about how lucky he is, and how he's throwing it all away. Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to hold on to her anger, her suspicion. But something in his voice made it hard. Something raw and broken that she recognized all too well. Mr. Caruso Dominic, he corrected. If I'm going to pretend to be your daughter's father, you should probably stop calling me Mr. Caruso. Elena almost laughed. Almost. I'm not saying yes, she said carefully. I'm not asking you to. Dominic stepped back, giving her space. Think about it. Talk to your daughter. See if she even wants some stranger at her party. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. The offer stands, Elena. No strings attached. No debts. Just a man who wants to know what it feels like to belong to someone. And then he was gone. Elena stood alone in the empty hallway, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to refuse. Every scar Marcus had left screamed at her to protect herself, to protect Lily. But that night, when she got home, Lily was sitting at the kitchen table with a piece of paper in front of her. A drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. "Mommy," Lily whispered, her little voice trembling. "Why doesn't Daddy want to come? Is it because of me?" Elena's heart shattered into a million pieces. She pulled her daughter into her arms and held her tight, fighting back tears. And in that moment, Dominic's words echoed in her mind like a ghost she couldn't escape. She had no choice. She had to say yes. 3 days later, Dominic's phone buzzed at midnight. He was sitting in his penthouse, staring at the city lights below, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Sleep had become a stranger to him lately. Every night, he found himself replaying that moment in the hallway. Elena's broken voice, the desperation in her eyes, the way she had looked at him like he was either a monster or a madman. Maybe he was both. When he saw the unknown number flashing on his screen, something in his chest tightened. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Caruso." Elena's voice was barely above a whisper, exhausted, defeated, like someone who had been fighting a war she knew she couldn't win. "Elena." He sat up straighter. "Is everything all right?" A long pause. He could hear her breathing on the other end, shaky and uneven. "She's been crying," Elena finally said. "Every night this week. She keeps asking why her daddy doesn't love her. She keeps asking what she did wrong." Dominic closed his eyes. The image of a little girl crying herself to sleep carved itself into his mind like a knife. "I told her it wasn't her fault," Elena continued, her voice cracking. "I told her she's perfect, that she's the best thing that ever happened to me. But she doesn't believe me. She just wants a daddy, Mr. Caruso. That's all she wants." Dominic waited. He could feel the words building on her end, the decision she was struggling to make. "I'll do it," Elena whispered. "I'll let you come to the party." Relief and fear collided in Dominic's chest. He gripped the phone tighter. "But I have conditions," Elena added quickly, her voice hardening. "One day, that's it. You show up, you play the part, and then you disappear. No promises, no coming back, no making her think this is something it's not. I understand. Do you?" Elena's voice rose slightly. "Because if you hurt her, if you make her believe in something and then rip it away, I will never forgive you. And I don't care how powerful you are. I will find a way to make you pay." Dominic almost smiled. "Almost. You have my word," he said quietly. "One day. No promises. No coming back." Elena exhaled. The sound was heavy, loaded with doubt and desperate hope. "Saturday, 2 o'clock. St. Mary's Catholic School on Ashland Avenue. I'll be there." The line went dead. Dominic sat in the darkness for a long time, the phone still pressed against his ear. He had made countless deals in his life, deals worth millions, deals that decided whether men lived or died, but none of them had ever felt as important as this one. The next morning, he did something he hadn't done in years. He went shopping, not for suits or watches or expensive things that meant nothing. He went to a toy store. A real toy store, with bright lights and colorful shelves and children running everywhere. He stood in the middle of the stuffed animal aisle, completely lost, surrounded by bears and rabbits and unicorns in every color imaginable. A salesgirl approached him nervously. She clearly recognized him. Everyone in Chicago recognized him. Can I help you, sir?" Dominic stared at the wall of plush toys. "I need something for a little girl. She's 6 years old." The salesgirl blinked, clearly struggling to reconcile the image of Dominic Caruso buying a teddy bear. "What is she like?" Dominic opened his mouth, then closed it. He realized he had no idea. He didn't know what Lily liked. He didn't know her favorite color or her favorite cartoon or anything about her at all. "Something soft," he finally said. "Something she can hold when she's scared." He left the store 20 minutes later with a brown teddy bear wearing a red bow. It was simple, ordinary, nothing like the expensive gifts he was used to giving, but somehow it felt right. That night, Vinny found him in his office at the Black Rose, staring at a closet full of designer suits. "Boss, we need to talk about the shipment coming in from Vinny," stopped mid-sentence, noticing the teddy bear sitting on Dominic's desk. "What the hell is that?" "A gift." Vinny's eyes narrowed. "A gift for who?" Dominic didn't answer. He pulled out a dark blue button-down shirt and held it up, examining it critically. Too formal. Everything he owned was too formal. "Boss," Vinny's voice dropped. "I've been hearing things. People are saying you're getting involved with some cleaning lady, that you're planning to go to some kid's school party." Dominic put the shirt back. "People talk too much. This is crazy." Vinny stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're Dominic Caruso. You don't go to school parties. You don't play daddy with some random kid. What the hell are you thinking?" Dominic turned to face his oldest friend, his most loyal soldier, the man who had stood beside him through blood and betrayal and everything in between. "I'm thinking," Dominic said slowly, "that I've spent my entire life building an empire, and I have nothing to show for it except enemies and empty rooms." Vinny stared at him. "Boss, this is something I have to do." "Vinny." Dominic's voice was quiet but final. "Don't ask me to explain it. Just trust me." Vinny opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. He had known Dominic long enough to recognize when a decision was made. "Fine," he muttered. "But if this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." That night, Dominic lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. His mind kept racing, playing out scenarios, imagining everything that could go wrong. What if Lily hated him? What if she saw through the act immediately? What if he made everything worse? The hours crawled by. Darkness turned to gray. Gray turned to gold. Saturday morning arrived. Dominic showered, dressed in the most casual clothes he owned, and picked up the teddy bear from his desk. He stared at it for a long moment, then headed for the door. The drive to street. Mary's Catholic school took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of silence. 20 minutes of his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. When he pulled up to the school gates, he saw the balloons, the banners, the families streaming through the entrance, fathers holding their children's hands, laughing, smiling. A world he had never belonged to. Dominic gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His heart was beating like he was walking into the deadliest battle of his life. The gates of St. Mary's Catholic School overflowed with balloons and the sound of children's laughter. Dominic arrived 15 minutes early. He parked his black Mercedes across the street and sat there, watching, observing, trying to understand a world he had never been part of. Fathers everywhere, real fathers. They walked through the gates with their children perched on their shoulders, tiny hands gripping their hair. They knelt down to tie shoelaces, wiped chocolate from sticky fingers, chased giggling kids across the grass. They laughed easily, naturally, as if joy was something that came without effort. Dominic had never known that kind of ease. He watched a man in a faded baseball cap swing his daughter in circles, her squeals of delight echoing across the parking lot. Another father crouched beside his son, pointing at something on the ground, both of them completely absorbed in whatever small wonder they had discovered together. These men weren't powerful. They weren't wealthy. Most of them drove old cars and wore clothes that had seen better days. But they had something Dominic didn't. They had someone who needed them. Someone who loved them not for what they could provide, but simply for who they were. Dominic's chest tightened. For a moment, he considered starting the car and driving away. This was a mistake. He didn't belong here. He was Dominic Caruso, the man who made Chicago tremble. He had no business pretending to be something he wasn't. But then he saw them. Elena walked through the parking lot, holding the hand of a little girl in a floral dress. The girl had curly brown hair that bounced with every step, and eyes so big they seemed to hold the entire world inside them. Lily. Dominic's breath caught in his throat. She was small, so impossibly small, and yet she walked with a confidence that seemed to defy her size. her free hand swinging at her side, her head turning this way and that as she took in the colorful decorations around her. Elena spotted his car and stopped. Even from across the street, Dominic could see the tension in her shoulders, the worry etched into her face. She was having second thoughts. He could tell. But then Lily tugged on her mother's hand, pointing excitedly at the balloons tied to the school gates, and Elena's expression softened. She took a deep breath and started walking toward him. Dominic stepped out of the car. His legs felt like they were filled with lead. Every step toward them required more effort than any business negotiation he had ever conducted, more courage than any confrontation with rival families. He was terrified. Elena stopped a few feet away from him. Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign that this was a trick, a game, a mistake. But whatever she saw there must have reassured her, because she gave him a small nod. Then she looked down at her daughter. "Lily, this is Mommy's friend. He's coming to the party with us." Lily looked up at Dominic. Way up. He was tall, and she was so small that she had to crane her neck just to see his face. For a long moment, she just stared at him, studying him, evaluating him with the unfiltered honesty that only children possessed. Dominic braced himself for fear, for rejection, for the same wariness he saw in the eyes of everyone who knew his name. But Lily didn't look afraid. She looked curious, interested, like he was a puzzle she wanted to figure out. "You're really tall," she said matter-of-factly. Dominic blinked. Of all the things he had expected her to say, that wasn't it. Yes, he managed. "I suppose I am." Lily tilted her head, still studying him. "Do you like ice cream?" The question caught him completely off guard. He glanced at Elena, who looked just as surprised as he felt. Yes, I like ice cream." Lily's face broke into a wide smile. It was like watching the sun come out from behind the clouds. Bright, warm, utterly transforming. "Good," she declared, "because Mommy says the party has ice cream, and I want chocolate. What kind do you want?" Dominic felt something crack inside his chest, something he had kept locked away for so long that he had forgotten it existed. "Chocolate sounds perfect," he heard himself say. Lily nodded approvingly. Then, without any hesitation, without any fear, she reached out her tiny hand toward him. "Come on," she said. "We're going to be late." Dominic stared at that small hand, those little fingers, the chipped pink nail polish on her tiny nails. Elena watched him, holding her breath, slowly, carefully, as if he were handling something infinitely precious. Dominic reached down and took Lily's hand in his. It was warm, soft, so small that it practically disappeared inside his palm, and it held on to him with a trust so complete, so absolute, that Dominic almost forgot how to breathe. He had held power in his hands. He had held money, weapons, the fates of men who begged for mercy. But he had never held anything like this. Lily tugged him forward, already chattering about the games she wanted to play and the friends she wanted him to meet. Elena fell into step beside them, her eyes glistening with something that might have been hope. And Dominic Caruso, the most feared man in Chicago, let a 6-year-old girl lead him through the gates of St. Mary's Catholic School. His heart pounded against his ribs, not from fear, from something far more dangerous. The three of them walked into the schoolyard together. The Father's Day celebration was already in full swing. Colorful streamers hung from every tree branch. Tables covered in bright paper cloths held plates of cookies, cups of lemonade, and trays of cupcakes decorated with frosting that spelled out "Best Dad Ever." Children ran everywhere, their laughter filling the air like music. Dominic felt completely out of place. He watched families gathered on picnic blankets, fathers teaching their sons how to throw a baseball, daughters dragging their dads toward the face-painting booth. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Everyone seemed to belong. Everyone except him. Lily, however, didn't seem to notice his discomfort. She marched forward with purpose, still gripping his hand, pointing out everything she wanted to show him. "That's where we eat lunch," she announced, gesturing toward a row of benches. "And that's where Tommy Miller threw up last week. It was really gross. And that's the sandbox where I built a castle. But some mean boy knocked it down, so I told Miss Patterson, and he had to say sorry." Dominic nodded along, absorbing every word as if she were delivering the most important briefing of his life. "And there's Miss Patterson," Lily squealed, tugging him forward with sudden urgency. Come on, you have to meet her." A woman in her 50s approached them, wearing a warm smile and a dress covered in tiny apples. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes crinkled at the corners when she saw Lily bounding toward her. "Lily Santos," Miss Patterson exclaimed, opening her arms wide. There's my favorite artist. I've been waiting for you." Lily released Dominic's hand just long enough to give her teacher a quick hug. Then she grabbed him again, pulling him closer with surprising strength. Miss Patterson's eyes moved to Dominic. She studied him for a moment, taking in the expensive clothes, the polished shoes, the face that didn't quite match the other fathers in attendance. "And who is this handsome gentleman?" she asked, her smile still warm but her eyes curious. Dominic opened his mouth to introduce himself, to explain, to say something that made sense. But Lily spoke first. "This is my daddy." The words hit Dominic like a thunderbolt. He stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. His heart did something strange in his chest. It cracked, it shattered, and then, somehow, it began to piece itself back together, all in the span of a single heartbeat. My daddy. 2 words. 2 simple words that children said every day without thinking, but Dominic had never heard them directed at him. Not once in 37 years of living. Elena made a small sound beside him. He glanced over and saw her turning away, her hand pressed against her mouth, her eyes shimmering with tears she was desperately trying to hide. Miss Patterson's smile widened, oblivious to the earthquake happening inside Dominic's soul. "So nice to finally meet you," she said warmly, extending her hand. "Lily talks about you all the time. She's always telling me stories about her daddy." Dominic stared at the teacher's outstretched hand. His mind raced. Lily talked about him? But they had just met. She had known him for less than 5 minutes. Then he understood. Lily had been talking about a father she wished she had, a father she dreamed about, a father she had invented in her imagination because the real one had abandoned her. And now, in her innocent mind, that imaginary father had become real. He had shown up. He was standing right here, holding her hand. Dominic took Miss Patterson's hand and shook it. His grip was firm, but his voice came out softer than he intended. "It's nice to meet you too," Miss Patterson beamed. "Well, Lily, why don't you show your daddy around? The craft station is all set up, and I know you've been excited about making your Father's Day card." Lily's face lit up. "Come on, Daddy. I'm going to make you the best card ever. It's going to have so much glitter." "Do you like glitter?" Dominic looked down at her, at those big brown eyes shining up at him with pure, uncomplicated joy, at that smile that seemed to trust him completely, even though she barely knew him. "I love glitter," he said. It was possibly the first lie he had ever told that felt like the truth. Lily giggled and pulled him toward the craft tables. Elena followed behind, wiping her eyes, watching them go. As they walked, Dominic became aware of something shifting inside him, something he couldn't name and didn't understand. He had spent his entire life building walls, protecting himself, making sure no one could ever get close enough to hurt him. But this little girl, with her curly hair and her chipped nail polish and her endless chatter, had walked straight through those walls like they were made of paper. She called him Daddy, and for the first time in 37 years, Dominic Caruso felt like he belonged somewhere, not in the boardrooms where he made deals, not in the dark corners where he conducted business, but here, in a schoolyard full of balloons and laughter and sticky-fingered children, here, holding the hand of a little girl who looked at him like he was her whole world. It was the most dangerous feeling he had ever experienced. More dangerous than any bullet, more dangerous than any enemy, because it made him want something he had sworn he would never want again. It made him want to stay. Lily dragged Dominic to the craft table as if he were her newest toy. The table was chaos. Sheets of colored paper scattered everywhere, bottles of glue tipped on their sides, leaving sticky trails across the plastic tablecloth. Containers of glitter in every color imaginable sparkled under the afternoon sun, their contents already spreading to places glitter had no business being. Children crowded around the table, their small hands working furiously on cards and drawings. Fathers sat beside them, some looking just as lost as Dominic felt. Others covered in so much glitter, they looked like they had lost a fight with a disco ball. Lily found 2 empty seats and patted the chair beside her. "Sit here, Daddy, right next to me." Dominic lowered himself onto the tiny plastic chair. His knees came up almost to his chest. He looked ridiculous, and he knew it, but Lily didn't seem to notice or care. Elena stood a few feet away, watching with an expression Dominic couldn't quite read, something between amusement and wonder. "Okay," Lily announced, her voice taking on the tone of a tiny general commanding her troops. "We're going to make you a card. The best card ever. First, you need paper." She thrust a piece of bright red construction paper into his hands. "Now fold it in half, like this." She demonstrated with her own piece of pink paper, her small fingers working with practiced precision. Dominic mimicked her movements, feeling utterly foolish. He had signed contracts worth millions without a second thought. He had negotiated with some of the most dangerous men in the country, and now he was struggling to fold a piece of paper correctly. Good, Lily said approvingly, though his fold was slightly crooked. Now we need glue. And glitter. Lots of glitter. Dominic reached for a bottle of silver glitter. Lily shook her head vigorously. No, Daddy, the purple one. Purple is the best. Dominic obediently put down the silver and picked up the purple. For the next 20 minutes, Lily guided him through the card-making process with the patience of a seasoned teacher. She showed him how to squeeze the glue in patterns, how to sprinkle the glitter evenly, how to press down the edges so nothing fell off. Dominic followed every instruction without complaint. When she told him to add more glitter, he added more glitter. When she told him his heart shape looked more like a potato, he started over. When she laughed at the glue stuck to his fingers, he found himself laughing too. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed like that. No, Daddy, you have to put more glitter. More. Dominic looked at his card, which was already drowning in purple sparkles. More? He asked, genuinely confused. There's already quite a lot. Lily shook her head firmly. There's no such thing as too much glitter. That's the rule. Dominic glanced at Elena, who was trying very hard not to smile. You heard her, Elena said, shrugging. That's the rule. Dominic turned back to his card and dumped another generous coating of glitter onto the surface. Lily nodded with satisfaction. Perfect. While Dominic wrestled with his increasingly sparkly creation, Lily had moved on to her own project. She worked in silence for several minutes, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated, her small hand gripping a crayon with fierce determination. Dominic watched her out of the corner of his eye, the way her forehead scrunched up when she was focused, the way she hummed softly to herself, a tune he didn't recognize, the way she occasionally held up her paper to examine it before continuing. Finally, she put down her crayon and held up her masterpiece. Done, she announced proudly. Dominic leaned over to look. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures standing side by side under a large yellow sun. The figure on the left was small, with curly brown hair. The figure in the middle was taller, with long black hair. And the figure on the right was the tallest, wearing what appeared to be a blue shirt. Above each figure, in wobbly letters, Lily had written labels. Lily, Mommy, Daddy. The 3 figures were holding hands, and around them, surrounding them like a protective barrier, Lily had drawn hearts, dozens of hearts, big hearts, small hearts, hearts in every color she could find. Dominic's throat closed. He stared at the drawing, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything but absorb what he was seeing. This wasn't just a picture. This was a wish, a dream, a prayer from a little girl who had spent her entire life wanting something she thought she could never have, and she had put him in it. She had made him part of her family. This is us, Lily said, pointing at the 3 figures with unmistakable pride. A real family. She looked up at him, those big brown eyes shining with joy, waiting for his reaction. Dominic opened his mouth to say something, anything. But no words came, because he knew if he tried to speak, his voice would break. And if his voice broke, the tears burning behind his eyes would fall. And if those tears fell, he would shatter into a million pieces right here in this schoolyard, surrounded by glitter and children and a 6-year-old girl who had somehow, without even trying, found her way into the deepest part of his heart. So he just nodded and prayed that Lily couldn't see how completely she had destroyed him. The celebration ended as the sun began to set. Orange and pink streaked across the Chicago sky, painting the schoolyard in warm, fading light. Families started packing up their things, gathering leftover cupcakes and deflated balloons. Children protested, begging for 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes, just a little longer. Dominic stood near the school gates, watching the exodus. His card, now thoroughly covered in purple glitter, was tucked carefully under his arm. Lily had insisted he keep it. It's for you, Daddy, she had said, pressing it into his hands with great solemnity. So you don't forget today, as if he could ever forget. The afternoon had passed in a blur of games and laughter and sticky fingers. He had pushed Lily on the swings until his arms ached. He had eaten 3 cupcakes because she insisted he try every flavor. He had let her paint a lopsided butterfly on his cheek because she said it would make him look pretty. And through it all, she had held his hand. Every chance she got, her small fingers would find his, holding on as if she were afraid he might disappear. Now, as the party wound down, Dominic knew it was time. Time to say goodbye. Time to keep his promise to Elena. One day, No coming back. He turned to find Elena gathering their things from the picnic table. Lily was beside her, clutching the teddy bear Dominic had given her at the start of the day. She hadn't let go of it for a single moment. Dominic walked over, his footsteps heavy. Each step felt like walking toward his own execution. "Elena," he said quietly, "I should probably—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elena looked up at him, her expression unreadable. She gave a small nod, then turned to her daughter. "Lily, sweetheart, it's time to say goodbye." Lily's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide with sudden panic. "What? No, Daddy just got here. He can't leave yet, Lily." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "We talked about this, remember? He came to the party, and now—" "No." Lily launched herself at Dominic, wrapping her tiny arms around his leg with surprising strength. She pressed her face against his knee, her whole body trembling. "Don't go, Daddy. Please. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. I won't ask for anything else. I won't cry. I won't be loud. Just please don't go." Her voice cracked on the last word. Dominic felt his heart shatter all over again. He looked at Elena, desperate for guidance. But she was crying too, her hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked just as lost as he felt. Slowly, carefully, Dominic knelt down. He was eye level with Lily now. Her face was red and blotchy, tears carving tracks down her cheeks. Her lower lip quivered. She clutched the teddy bear so tightly that its button eye looked ready to pop off. "Lily," he said softly, "look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his. Those big brown eyes, swimming with tears, filled with a fear that no 6-year-old should ever have to feel. The fear of being abandoned. Again. Dominic's throat tightened. He had faced down enemies who wanted him dead. He had stared into the barrel of a gun without flinching. But this little girl's tears were harder to bear than any of that. "You are good," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are the best. This isn't about you being good or bad. Do you understand?" Lily shook her head, not believing him. "It's my fault," she whispered. "Daddies always leave because of me. Mommy's friend Sarah said that her daddy left too, and no." Dominic's voice came out sharper than he intended. He softened it immediately. "No, Lily, that's not true. Sometimes adults make mistakes. Sometimes they leave when they shouldn't. But that's never, ever the child's fault. Do you hear me?" Lily sniffled. "Then why are you leaving?" The question hung in the air. Dominic looked at Elena. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Waiting, holding her breath. He had made a promise. One day. No coming back. But looking at this little girl, feeling her trembling against him, seeing the desperate hope in her eyes, he couldn't do it. He couldn't walk away and leave her thinking she wasn't enough. That she had done something wrong. That she had driven another daddy away. "I'll come back," he heard himself say. "I promise." Lily's eyes widened. "You promise? Really, truly promise?" Dominic nodded slowly. "Really, truly promise." He looked up at Elena, expecting anger, expecting her to remind him of their deal, their agreement, all the boundaries she had carefully constructed. But Elena wasn't angry. She was staring at him with something new in her eyes, something that looked almost like wonder. She saw it now, the thing she had been searching for since the beginning. She saw sincerity, real, unguarded sincerity, the thing Marcus had never, not once, shown her. Elena gave him a small nod. Permission. Lily threw her arms around Dominic's neck, hugging him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Dominic held her, just held her. An hour later, he drove back to his penthouse alone. The city lights glittered below as the elevator carried him up to the 40th floor. He walked into the silence of his empty home, the glitter-covered card still in his hand. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't painful. It was filled with something he had forgotten existed. Hope. The weeks that followed passed like a dream Dominic never wanted to wake from. He kept his promise. Every single day. At first, it was small things. He would show up at street, Mary's when school let out, waiting by the gates like all the other parents. The first time Lily spotted him in the crowd, she had screamed his name so loudly that every head turned. She had sprinted toward him, backpack bouncing wildly, and launched herself into his arms with complete abandon. The other parents stared. Some whispered. A few recognized him, their faces going pale. Dominic didn't care. He took Lily for ice cream that afternoon. Chocolate. Her favorite. She got it all over her face, and somehow managed to drip some onto his Italian leather shoes. He didn't say a word about it. Days turned into weeks. Ice cream trips became routine. Then came visits to the park. Then dinners at Elena's small apartment, where Dominic sat at a cramped kitchen table and ate homemade rice and beans, like it was the finest meal he had ever tasted, because in a way, it was. Elena watched him carefully at first. She kept waiting for the mask to slip, for the real Dominic Caruso to emerge. The cold, ruthless man everyone feared, but he never did. Instead, she saw him get down on his hands and knees to play tea party with Lily. She saw him sit through an entire animated movie about talking animals without checking his phone once. She saw him carry her sleeping daughter from the car to her bed, moving so gently that Lily never stirred. The penthouse began to change too. It started with a single stuffed animal, then a coloring book, then crayons scattered across the coffee table that cost more than most people's cars. Dominic didn't clean them up. He liked seeing them there, liked the evidence that someone small and wonderful had passed through his life. One evening, he did something that surprised even himself. He transformed one of the empty guest rooms into Lily's room. He hired painters to cover the walls in soft pink. He filled the shelves with stuffed animals. He bought a bed shaped like a princess castle and hung fairy lights from the ceiling. He even found a tiny desk where she could draw her pictures. The first time Lily saw it, she froze in the doorway. She stood completely still, her mouth hanging open, her eyes traveling over every detail: the pink walls, the mountain of teddy bears, the sparkly curtains that caught the light. Then she screamed. It was a scream of pure, unbridled joy. She ran into the room, spinning in circles, touching everything, laughing and crying at the same time. "This is mine?" she kept asking. "This is really mine?" "All yours," Dominic said quietly. "Whenever you want to visit." Lily threw herself at him, hugging him so hard he stumbled backward. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered into his chest. Dominic closed his eyes. Those 3 words hit him harder than anything ever had. "I love you too, Princess." Elena's mother, Rosa, was harder to win over. The first time Dominic came to pick up Lily, Rosa had stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her eyes narrowed. She looked at him like he was a wolf trying to get into the henhouse. "I know who you are," she had said flatly. "Everyone in Chicago knows who you are." Dominic met her gaze without flinching. "Then you know I keep my word." Rosa hadn't responded, but she also hadn't stopped him. Over time, her suspicion began to thaw. She watched how Dominic treated her granddaughter, how patient he was, how gentle, how he never raised his voice, never lost his temper, never made Lily feel anything less than treasured. One evening, as Dominic was leaving, Rosa stopped him at the door. "You're not what I expected," she said grudgingly. "Neither are you," Dominic replied. Rosa almost smiled. Almost. As the weeks passed, Dominic learned things he never imagined he would learn. He learned how to braid hair, badly, at first, but Lily wore his lopsided creations with pride. He learned how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches cut into star shapes, because Lily insisted stars tasted better than squares. He learned the names of all her classmates, her favorite cartoon characters, her most treasured bedtime stories, and every night that he stayed over, he read to her until she fell asleep. Her small body curled against his side, her breathing slow and peaceful, her tiny hand clutching his shirt. One night, as he finished reading her favorite story about a princess and a dragon, Lily looked up at him with those big brown eyes. "Daddy?" "Yes, Princess?" She was quiet for a moment, her forehead scrunched in thought. Then she asked the question that made Dominic's heart stop. "Are you going to marry Mommy?" The silence stretched between them. Dominic opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He had negotiated with killers. He had faced down men who wanted him dead. He had made decisions that changed the fate of empires. But he had no idea how to answer this. Lily's question haunted Dominic for days. "Are you going to marry Mommy?" He replayed it in his mind during business meetings, during late-night drives through the city, during the quiet moments when he sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the drawing Lily had made, the one with 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Mommy, Lily, Daddy, a real family. The truth crept up on him slowly, like dawn breaking over the Chicago skyline. It wasn't just Lily who had found her way into his heart. It was Elena too. He noticed things now that he hadn't before. The way she laughed when Lily said something ridiculous. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams. The bakery she wanted to open someday. The life she wanted to build for her daughter. He noticed the way his chest tightened whenever she smiled at him. The way he found excuses to stay longer at her apartment. The way he counted the hours until he would see her again. But he was Dominic Caruso. He had enemies. Dangerous enemies. Men who would use anything, anyone, to hurt him. If they knew about Elena and Lily, if they discovered this weakness he had been foolish enough to develop, he couldn't finish the thought. Some nights, he convinced himself to end it, to disappear from their lives before it was too late, to protect them by walking away. But then Lily would call him daddy, and Elena would look at him with those warm brown eyes, and all his resolve would crumble like ash. Elena was fighting her own battle. She felt it too. The pull between them, the way her heart raced when he walked through the door, the way she caught herself watching him when he wasn't looking, memorizing the lines of his face, the sound of his voice. But she was terrified. Marcus had destroyed her faith in men. He had made promises and broken every single one. He had left her alone and pregnant, struggling to survive, rebuilding her life from nothing. She couldn't survive that again. And Dominic was even more dangerous than Marcus. Not because he was cruel, but because he was kind. Because he showed up. Because he made her believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. If she let herself fall for him and he left, she would never recover. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep, they sat together in Elena's small living room. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Elena curled up on one end of the worn couch. Dominic sat on the other end, a careful distance between them. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Elena broke the silence. "What are we doing, Dominic?" He turned to look at her. She was staring at her hands, twisting them in her lap. "What do you mean? This?" She gestured vaguely between them. "You and me and Lily, playing house, pretending everything is normal when nothing about this is normal." Dominic was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you think we're doing? Pretending?" Elena looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "I don't know what we're doing, and that scares me. Because I've been here before, Dominic. I've trusted someone before. I've let myself believe before. And look where that got me." Her voice cracked. "I can't do that again. I can't let Lily get hurt. I can't let myself get hurt." Dominic moved closer, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. "I've never done this before," he said quietly. "Any of this. The school parties, the bedtime stories, the feelings." He almost laughed at how foreign the word sounded coming from his mouth. "I've spent my whole life building walls, keeping people out, making sure no one could ever get close enough to matter. Because people who matter can be used against you. People who matter make you weak." He paused, searching for the right words. "But then I heard you crying in that hallway, and I met Lily, and everything I thought I knew about strength and weakness stopped making sense." Elena's breath caught. "I don't know what this is," Dominic continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't give it a name, but I know I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose her." He reached out and gently took her hand. "And I don't want to lose you." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek, then another. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." She looked at him then, really looked at him, not at the reputation or the power or the fear that followed him everywhere, just at him. "What if this destroys us?" Dominic lifted his hand and gently wiped the tears from her face. "What if it doesn't?" The space between them disappeared. Elena didn't remember who moved first. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was him. Maybe they met somewhere in the middle. But suddenly his lips were on hers, soft and warm and desperate. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and longing into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads touching, breath ragged, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, because they both knew the truth. There was no going back now. Happiness never lasts forever. Dominic knew that better than anyone. For 3 months, he had allowed himself to believe otherwise. 3 months of Lily's laughter filling his penthouse. 3 months of Elena's smile warming places inside him that had been frozen for years. 3 months of something that felt dangerously close to a normal life. He should have known it couldn't last. The first sign came on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena was waiting outside street, Mary's, watching the children stream through the gates. Lily had stayed late for an art project, so Elena stood alone, scrolling through her phone, thinking about what to make for dinner. She didn't notice the man approaching until he was right beside her. Elena Santos. Long time no see. Her blood turned to ice. That voice. She would recognize it anywhere. It had whispered promises to her in the dark. It had told her everything would be okay. It had lied and lied and lied until she had nothing left. She turned slowly, praying she was wrong. She wasn't. Marcus Webb stood there, leaning against the chain-link fence like he owned it. 5 years had not been kind to him. His face was thinner, harder. Dark circles hung under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, his jaw unshaven, but that smile, that predatory, knowing smile, it hadn't changed at all. "Miss me?" he asked. Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought it might explode. "What are you doing here? Can't a father visit his daughter's school?" Marcus pushed himself off the fence and took a step closer. "Oh wait, that's right. I'm not supposed to be in the picture, am I? You made sure of that. You left." Elena's voice trembled despite her best efforts. "You walked away when I was pregnant. You didn't want anything to do with us. People change." Marcus shrugged, his eyes gleaming with something dark. "Besides, I've been hearing some interesting things lately. Rumors about you and some big shot. Some rich guy playing daddy to my kid." Elena's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that Elena could smell the cigarette smoke on his breath. "Word gets around, sweetheart. People talk. They say you landed yourself a real whale. Dominic Caruso, right? The Dominic Caruso?" He let out a low whistle. "That's quite an upgrade from me. Leave us alone, Marcus. See, here's the thing." His smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold. "I've been having some money trouble lately. Bad luck at the tables. You know how it is. And then I hear my baby mama is shacking up with one of the richest men in Chicago." He tilted his head, studying her like a snake, sizing up a mouse. "Maybe it's time I reconnect with my daughter. You know, establish a relationship. Fight for my parental rights." He paused, letting the threat sink in. "Or, we can work out a deal. Make this whole messy situation go away quietly." Elena felt sick. "You don't care about Lily. You never did." "No," Marcus agreed cheerfully. "But the courts don't know that, do they? All they'll see is a loving father who wants to be part of his daughter's life, and a mother who's been keeping him away while she shacks up with a known criminal." He reached out and touched her face. Elena flinched away. "Think about it, sweetheart. Talk to your boyfriend. I'm sure he can spare some cash to make this problem disappear." Marcus walked away, whistling a tuneless melody. Elena stood frozen until he disappeared around the corner. Then her legs gave out. She sank onto the nearest bench, her whole body shaking. Lily came bouncing out of the school 5 minutes later, holding a painting of a purple elephant. She didn't notice her mother's pale face or trembling hands. She chattered happily all the way home about her art project and what she wanted for dinner. Elena smiled and nodded in all the right places. But inside, she was falling apart. The moment Lily was settled with Rosa, Elena grabbed her phone and locked herself in the bathroom. Her fingers shook as she dialed Dominic's number. He answered on the first ring. "Elena, what's wrong?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just a choked sob. "Elena, talk to me. What happened?" "He's back," she managed. "Marcus. He found me outside Lily's school. He knows about you. He knows everything." She told him everything. The threats. The blackmail. The way Marcus had looked at her like she was nothing more than a means to an end. When she finished, there was silence on the other end. Complete, absolute silence. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. And in that silence, Elena heard something she had never heard before, in Dominic's voice. Rage. Pure, cold, controlled rage. "Where is he now?" The words came out flat, emotionless, as cold as the depths of Lake Michigan in winter. Elena shivered. "I don't know. He just walked away." "Dominic, what are you going to? Stay home. Lock the doors. Don't let Lily out of your sight." "Dominic, I'll handle this." The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone, her heart racing. For the first time since she had met him, she understood exactly why the entire city of Chicago was afraid of Dominic Caruso. Dominic wanted to handle Marcus the way the underworld handled problems. Fast, clean, permanent. Within an hour of Elena's phone call, Vinny was standing in Dominic's office at the Black Rose. The look on his face said he already knew what his boss was thinking. "Just give me the word," Vinny said quietly. "I can have it done tonight. No traces. No witnesses. He'll just disappear." Dominic stood at the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. His jaw was clenched so tight it ached. His hands were balled into fists at his sides. Every instinct he had screamed at him to say yes. Marcus Webb was a cockroach, a parasite, a man who had abandoned his own child and now wanted to use her as a bargaining chip. The world would be better off without him. Dominic had made men disappear for far less. "Boss?" Vinny prompted. Dominic closed his eyes. He saw Lily's face, her big brown eyes, her gap-toothed smile, the way she ran to him every time he walked through the door. He saw Elena, the woman who had trusted him despite every reason not to, the woman who had let him into her life, into her daughter's life, into her heart. If he gave the order, Marcus would be gone forever, but so would everything else. Elena would know. She would see the monster beneath the mask. She would take Lily and run, and he would never see either of them again. And if he was caught, even if he was just suspected, he would go to prison. Lily would grow up knowing her daddy was a murderer. She would spend the rest of her life ashamed of the man she had loved so unconditionally. The thought was unbearable. No, Vinny blinked. No, Dominic turned from the window. We do this a different way. Boss, with all due respect, this guy is scum. He's threatening your family. If we don't, I said no. The words came out sharp, final. Vinny fell silent. Dominic took a breath, steadying himself. Find me Anthony Moretti, the family law attorney, the best one in the city. Vinny looked confused. A lawyer? You want to fight this in court? I want to destroy him legally. Dominic's eyes hardened. I want to take apart every piece of his life until he has nothing left to stand on. And when it's over, I want him to know that he lost because he was never good enough, not because I pulled strings or made phone calls. Vinny stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'll make the call. That night, Dominic went to Elena's apartment. She was waiting for him at the door, her face pale and drawn. The moment she saw him, she threw herself into his arms. I was so scared, she whispered against his chest. I thought you were going to do something terrible. Something that would take you away from us. Dominic held her tightly. I wanted to, he admitted. God, Elena. I wanted to make him pay for every tear he's ever made you cry. She pulled back and looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. But you didn't. No. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Because you were right. If I did that, I would lose everything that matters. I would lose Lily. I would lose you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I can't lose you, Dominic. Lily can't lose you. We need you here. Not in prison. Not running from the law. Here. He pulled her close again. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. The next day, Dominic met with Anthony Moretti. The lawyer was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s with silver hair and a reputation for winning impossible cases. He listened without interrupting as Dominic explained the situation. We need to build an airtight case, Moretti said when Dominic finished. Prove beyond any doubt that Marcus Webb is unfit to be a parent. Abandonment. Failure to pay child support. Any history of criminal behavior or addiction. I can get you everything you need, Dominic replied. And he did. Over the following weeks, Dominic's men quietly gathered evidence. Bank records showing Marcus had never paid a cent in child support. Phone logs documenting years of ignored calls from Elena. Text messages where Marcus had explicitly stated he wanted nothing to do with his daughter. They also discovered that Marcus was drowning in gambling debts. He owed money to dangerous people who were growing impatient. Dominic filed away that information for later. Moretti built their case brick by brick. He subpoenaed records, interviewed witnesses, compiled a mountain of evidence that painted Marcus Webb as exactly what he was. A deadbeat father who only reappeared when he smelled money. Elena testified about the years of silence, the unanswered calls, the nights she had held Lily while she cried for a daddy who never came. Rosa provided statements about raising her granddaughter while Elena worked 3 jobs to survive. Even Lily's teachers submitted letters describing the dramatic positive change in the little girl since Dominic had entered her life. Everything was falling into place. And then, 3 weeks before the custody hearing, Marcus made his move. He filed a formal petition for joint custody of Lily Isabella Santos. The court date was set. The war had officially begun. The first hearing took place at Cook County Family Court on a gray October morning. Elena had barely slept the night before. She stood outside the courthouse, staring up at the imposing stone building, feeling like she was about to walk into her own execution. Dominic stood beside her, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. Whatever happens in there, he said quietly, we face it together. Understand? Elena nodded, but she couldn't stop shaking. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than she had imagined. Wood-paneled walls, harsh fluorescent lights, the smell of old paper and stale coffee. A judge's bench loomed at the front, empty for now but radiating authority. Elena took her seat at the plaintiff's table next to Attorney Moretti. Dominic sat directly behind her in the gallery, close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield at her back. Marcus arrived a few minutes later. He had cleaned himself up for the occasion. New suit, fresh shave, hair slicked back. He looked almost respectable, almost like the man Elena had once believed he could be. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Marcus smirked. Elena looked away, her stomach churning. Marcus's lawyer was a thin man with sharp features and an expensive watch. His name was Gerald Price, and according to Moretti, He specialized in making guilty people look innocent. The judge entered, the Honorable Patricia Winters, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. This court is now in session. The proceedings began. Price wasted no time going on the attack. Your Honor, he began, rising from his seat with theatrical confidence. My client, Marcus Webb, is here today seeking nothing more than his constitutional right to be part of his daughter's life, a right that has been systematically denied to him by the mother. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. Furthermore, Price continued, turning to gesture toward Dominic, we must address the presence of a deeply troubling influence in this child's life. Dominic Caruso, a man whose name is synonymous with organized crime in this city, a man who has no legal standing, no biological connection, and no business being near a 6-year-old child. He turned back to the judge, his voice dripping with false concern. Your Honor, my client is the biological father. This criminal has no legal standing whatsoever, and yet he has been allowed unfettered access to this impressionable young girl. We believe this poses a serious risk to her safety and well-being. Dominic's expression didn't change. He sat perfectly still, his face carved from stone. But Elena saw his hands. His fingers gripped the edge of the bench in front of him, knuckles white with restrained fury. Moretti rose to respond, calm and measured. Your Honor, Mr. Webb abandoned his daughter before she was even born. He has paid not a single dollar in child support. He has made no attempt to contact his daughter in 6 years. The only reason he is here today is because he discovered that Miss Santos is now in a relationship with a man of means. He held up a thick folder. We have documented evidence of Mr. Webb's complete absence from his daughter's life. Text messages in which he explicitly refused any involvement. Bank records showing zero financial support. This is not a father seeking reconnection. This is a man seeking a payday. Price objected. Arguments flew back and forth. Then came Elena's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand on trembling legs. The oath felt heavy on her tongue. When she sat down, she could see Marcus watching her with that same cold smirk. Price's questions were brutal. Miss Santos, you allowed a known criminal to spend time alone with your daughter. Is that correct? Dominic has never hurt Lily. He loves her. That wasn't my question. Did you or did you not allow a man with alleged ties to organized crime to have unsupervised contact with your minor child? He's not dangerous to her. He would never, yes or no, Miss Santos. Yes, but no further questions. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. She looked at the judge, desperate to explain. Please, she said, her voice cracking. You have to understand. I raised my daughter alone for 6 years. I worked 3 jobs. I went without food so she could eat. I held her every night when she cried for a father who never came. She pointed at Marcus. He left. He chose to leave. And now he wants to use her to get money. That's all she is to him. A bargaining chip. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Winters studied Elena for a long moment, then turned to review the documents Moretti had submitted. This court will take a 2-week recess to review all evidence, she announced. We will reconvene on November 3rd. Relief flooded through Elena, but then Price spoke again. Your Honor, one more matter. Given the conflicting testimonies, we request that the child in question, Lily Santos, be called as a witness in the next hearing. We believe her perspective is essential to determining what is truly in her best interest. Elena's world tilted sideways. No, 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 no. She gripped the railing of the witness stand, suddenly dizzy. Judge Winters considered for a moment. I'll allow it. The child will be interviewed by a court-appointed specialist in a controlled setting. Elena barely heard the rest. Her vision blurred. The room spun. Behind her, she heard a sound. A sharp crack. She turned to see Dominic, still sitting perfectly still. But the wooden armrest of his bench had splintered under his grip. His face remained expressionless, but his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a man ready to burn the world down. Dominic could not let Lily be dragged into that courtroom. The thought of her sitting in front of strangers, being questioned about her life, being forced to choose between the father who abandoned her and the father who chose her, it made his blood boil. She was 6 years old. She still believed in magic and monsters under the bed and happily ever after. She didn't deserve to have her innocence shattered by lawyers and judges and a system that treated children like evidence. He had to end this. Now, 3 days after the hearing, Dominic made a decision. He didn't tell Elena. He didn't bring Vinny. He didn't inform Moretti. This was between him and Marcus. Man to man. The meeting place was a dive bar on the south side called the Rusty Nail. Flickering neon signs, cracked leather booths, the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke that had seeped into the walls over decades. Dominic arrived first. He chose a booth in the back corner, facing the door. Old habits. Marcus showed up 20 minutes late. He swaggered in like he owned the place, scanning the room until he spotted Dominic. A grin spread across his face as he slid into the opposite seat. Well, Marcus said, leaning back with exaggerated confidence. The great Dominic Caruso, slumming it in a place like this. Must be serious. Dominic didn't respond. He just watched, waited. Marcus's grin faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. So, you wanted to talk. Let's talk. He spread his hands magnanimously. I'm a reasonable guy. I'm sure we can work something out. Dominic reached into his jacket. Marcus tensed, his bravado cracking for just a moment. But instead of a weapon, Dominic pulled out a manila folder. He set it on the table between them. Open it. Marcus hesitated, then reached for the folder with a cocky smirk. What's this? Your love letters to my... The words died in his throat. Inside the folder were photographs, documents, bank statements, a detailed list of names and numbers, Marcus's gambling debts, every last one. His face went pale. Where did you get this? Dominic's voice was calm, almost conversational. You owe money to the Moreno family, $47,000. You owe another $32,000 to a bookie named Fat Tony on the west side. And then there's the $18,000 you borrowed from Jimmy Kwan's crew in Chinatown. He leaned forward slightly. Those are not patient people, Marcus. They don't send lawyers. They send men with baseball bats. Or worse. Marcus's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. This is... You can't. I know who you owe, Dominic continued, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I know what they'll do if they find you. One phone call, Marcus. That's all it takes. One phone call, and I tell them exactly where to find you. Marcus looked up, his face ashen. You wouldn't. Try me. The bravado was gone now. Marcus looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around the bar as if expecting thugs to burst through the door at any moment. Look, he said, his voice cracking. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can make a deal. You're a businessman, right? Let's be businessmen. He licked his lips nervously. 500,000. That's all I'm asking. You give me 500,000, and I disappear. I sign away my rights. You never see me again. Elena never sees me again. It's a win-win. Dominic stared at him. $500,000. That was the price Marcus Webb put on his own daughter. $500,000 to walk away from the child he had created and abandoned. The rage inside Dominic burned white-hot, but he kept his voice steady. No. Marcus blinked. What? You don't deserve a cent. Not one penny. You walked away from Lily when she was nothing but a heartbeat inside her mother. You ignored her for 6 years. You let her cry herself to sleep, wondering why her daddy didn't love her. Dominic leaned closer, his eyes boring into Marcus like twin drills. And now you think you can sell her? Like she's property? Like she's something to be traded? Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Here's what's going to happen, Dominic said quietly. You're going to drop the custody case. You're going to sign away your parental rights. And you're going to disappear from their lives forever. He tapped the folder. Or I make a phone call, and your creditors find out exactly where you've been hiding. The silence stretched between them. Marcus's jaw worked, his hands clenched and unclenched on the table. For a moment, Dominic thought he might actually cave. Then something shifted in Marcus's eyes. Desperation turned to defiance. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. You know what? I don't think so. His voice was shaky but stubborn. You're bluffing. You won't do anything that might hurt your precious reputation. And even if you did, I'd just tell the court everything. Tell them the big bad mafia boss threatened me. He grabbed his jacket. See you in court. Big shot. Marcus walked out without looking back. Dominic sat alone in the booth, the folder still on the table in front of him. He had given Marcus a chance, a way out that didn't involve blood or prison or broken bones. And Marcus had thrown it back in his face. Dominic picked up the folder and slid it back into his jacket. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The pressure from the custody battle began to crush everyone. Elena was falling apart. Dominic could see it in the shadows under her eyes, the way her clothes hung looser on her frame, the tremor in her hands when she poured her morning coffee. She barely ate. She barely slept. Every time her phone rang, she flinched like it was a gunshot. She tried to hide it, especially from Lily. She smiled when her daughter was watching. She laughed at Lily's jokes. She pretended everything was fine. But the moment Lily left the room, the mask crumbled. Dominic found her crying in the kitchen one night, her face buried in a dish towel to muffle the sound. He held her without saying a word, letting her sob against his chest until she had nothing left. "I can't lose her," Elena whispered, her voice raw and broken. "She's all I have. She's everything." "You won't lose her," Dominic promised. "I won't let that happen." But even as he said the words, he wondered if he could keep that promise. Lily sensed the tension. Children always do. She stopped asking questions about the court case, but her silence was worse than any question could have been. She became withdrawn, quieter than usual. She no longer ran to the door when Dominic arrived. She no longer chattered endlessly about her day at school. She flinched at loud noises. She clung to her teddy bear like a lifeline. She started wetting the bed again, something she hadn't done in over a year. Rosa noticed, too. "That child knows something is wrong," she told Dominic one evening, her voice heavy with worry. "She doesn't understand what, but she feels it. Children feel everything." Dominic nodded, his heart aching. He tried to make things normal for her. He still read her bedtime stories. He still took her for ice cream. He still braided her hair, even though his attempts were getting worse instead of better. But nothing could erase the fear that had settled into her little body. One night, Dominic was staying at Elena's apartment. It was past midnight, and the small home was quiet. Elena had finally fallen asleep after hours of tossing and turning. Dominic lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through legal strategies and worst-case scenarios. Then he heard it, soft footsteps padding down the hallway. He turned his head just as the bedroom door creaked open. Lily stood in the doorway, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. Her eyes were wide and glistening with tears. Her lower lip trembled. "Daddy?" Her voice was so small, so fragile, that it nearly broke him. Dominic sat up immediately, opening his arms. "Come here, princess." Lily ran to him, climbing onto the bed and burying herself against his chest. She was shaking. Her tiny body trembled like a leaf in a storm. Dominic held her close, rubbing gentle circles on her back. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Did you have a nightmare?" Lily shook her head against his chest. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice muffled by his shirt. "Am I a bad girl?" The question hit Dominic like a physical blow. "What?" "No, princess. Why would you think that?" Lily pulled back slightly, looking up at him with those big, tear-filled eyes. "That man, the one who came to Mommy's school. I heard Grandma talking about him. She said he wants to take me away." Her voice cracked. "Is it because I'm bad? Did I do something wrong? I'll be good, Daddy. I promise I'll be good. Please don't let him take me away." The tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. Something inside Dominic shattered completely. He pulled Lily close again, holding her so tightly, so desperately, that he was afraid he might hurt her. But she didn't complain. She just clung to him, her small fingers gripping his shirt. And for the first time since he was a child, Dominic Caruso cried. The tears came silently, sliding down his face as he held this little girl who had become his entire world. This little girl who thought she was bad, who thought she was being punished, who didn't understand why adults were fighting over her like she was a prize to be won. "Listen to me," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are not bad. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Do you understand? The best." Lily sniffled. "Really? Really?" He pulled back to look at her, wiping the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "You are kind. You are brave. You are the most wonderful little girl in the whole world, and nothing you did or could ever do would make me love you less." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And I will never let anyone take you away. Never. I promise you that, Lily. As long as I'm alive, you will always be safe. You will always be loved. You will always be mine." Lily's tears slowed. She looked at him with something like hope flickering in her eyes. "Forever, forever and always, princess." She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you will ever know." Lily fell asleep in his arms. Her breathing slowed, her body relaxed. Her grip on his shirt loosened, but never fully let go. Dominic stayed awake all night, holding her, watching her sleep, thinking. By the time dawn broke over Chicago, he had made his decision. It didn't matter what it took. It didn't matter what he had to sacrifice. It didn't matter if he had to burn down his entire empire to do it. He would protect this family, by any means necessary. 1 week before the final hearing, Elena's phone rang. She was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing legal documents with hands that hadn't stopped shaking for days. When she saw the name on the screen, Her blood went cold. Marcus. She almost didn't answer. Every instinct screamed at her to let it go to voicemail, to block the number, to pretend he didn't exist. But something made her pick up. What do you want? There was a long pause on the other end. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was different. Gone was the cocky arrogance, the smug superiority. He sounded tired, defeated, broken. I need to see you, in person. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. After everything you've done? After threatening to take my daughter? Why would I? I'm not threatening anyone. His voice cracked slightly. I need to talk to you. One last time. No lawyers, no tricks, just you and me. I don't trust you. I know. A heavy sigh came through the line. I know you don't. But please, Elena, just give me 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Elena hesitated. She looked across the room at Lily, who was curled up on the couch watching cartoons with her teddy bear, blissfully unaware of the conversation happening just a few feet away. Where? Grant Park, by the fountain. Tomorrow at noon. Elena's mind raced. This could be another trap, another scheme, another attempt to manipulate her. But there was something in his voice, something she had never heard before. Fear. Fine, she said finally, but I'm not coming alone. Marcus didn't argue. The next day, Elena and Dominic drove to Grant Park together. The autumn wind cut through the trees, scattering golden leaves across the walking paths. The famous Buckingham Fountain stood silent, its waters shut off for the approaching winter. A few joggers passed by, their breath visible in the cold air. Marcus was already there. He sat on a bench near the fountain, hunched over, staring at the ground. He looked nothing like the man who had swaggered into the courtroom weeks earlier. His clothes were rumpled. His face was covered in days-old stubble. Dark circles carved deep hollows under his eyes. He looked like a man who had lost everything. Dominic hung back, watching from a distance, close enough to intervene if necessary, far enough to give Elena space. Elena approached the bench slowly. Her heart pounded with every step. Marcus looked up when he heard her footsteps. He didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He just stared at her with empty eyes. You came. I said I would. Elena kept her voice steady, though her hands trembled in her coat pockets. Talk. You have 10 minutes. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked down at his hands, then back up at her. I'm done, he said quietly. I'm signing everything over. The custody petition, my parental rights. All of it. Elena blinked. She had expected another demand for money, another threat, another manipulation. Not this. What? You heard me. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. I'm done fighting. I'm done pretending I give a damn about being a father. Elena shook her head, not trusting her ears. Why? What changed? Marcus laughed bitterly. It was not a pleasant sound. What changed? Everything. He gestured vaguely at himself. Look at me, Elena. I've been sleeping in my car for the past week. The people I owe money to finally caught up with me. They made it very clear what happens if I don't pay. He pulled down the collar of his shirt, revealing a dark bruise spreading across his collarbone. This was a warning. Next time, they won't be so gentle. Elena stared at the bruise, feeling nothing but numbness. So you're giving up because you're scared. I'm giving up because I finally see the truth. Marcus's voice dropped. I was never going to be a father to her. Not really. I just saw an opportunity to make some quick cash and I took it. That's who I am, Elena. That's who I've always been. He looked toward the distant figure of Dominic, standing like a statue near the tree line. Him, though. Marcus shook his head slowly. He actually shows up. He actually cares. I saw the way Lily looked at him in those court photos, like he hung the moon. His jaw tightened. She never looked at me like that. Not once. Elena didn't know what to say. She had imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but never like this. Never with Marcus sitting defeated on a park bench, admitting his own failures. What exactly are you saying? Marcus met her eyes. For the first time since she had known him, there was no manipulation in his gaze, no calculation, just exhaustion and something that almost looked like regret. I'm saying I want him to adopt her. Officially, make it legal, give her a real father. Elena's breath caught. She deserves that, Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. She deserves someone who will actually be there, someone who will show up to her school plays and teach her to ride a bike and scare away the monsters under her bed. He stood up slowly, shoving his hands in his pockets. I was never that person. I was never going to be that person. He looked at Elena one last time. Let him be her dad. For real. Then he walked away, disappearing into the gray October afternoon, Elena stood frozen by the fountain, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, she heard footsteps approaching. Dominic's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her close. What did he say? Elena turned in his embrace, looking up at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. He wants you to adopt her. Dominic went completely still. He wants you to be her father. Officially. Marcus signed the papers that very afternoon. Attorney Moretti had arranged everything within hours of Elena's phone call. A conference room at his downtown office. Witnesses, notaries, every document prepared and waiting. Marcus arrived, looking even worse than he had at the park. His hands shook as he picked up the pen. He didn't read the papers. He didn't ask questions. He just signed wherever Moretti pointed, page after page, his signature becoming more unsteady with each one. When it was done, he stood up without a word. He paused at the door, his back to the room. Tell her, his voice caught. Tell her I'm sorry. For everything. Then he was gone. Moretti reviewed every document 3 times. He checked for loopholes, ambiguities, anything that could be challenged later. There were none. Marcus had surrendered completely, unconditionally, permanently. It's done, Moretti said, looking up at Dominic and Elena. He has no legal claim to Lily anymore. The path is clear for adoption proceedings to begin. Elena couldn't speak. She pressed her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Dominic reached for her hand and held it tight. They left the courthouse in a daze. The Chicago afternoon was crisp and bright, the sun breaking through clouds for the first time in weeks. People hurried past on the sidewalk, consumed by their own lives, oblivious to the miracle that had just occurred inside those stone walls. Elena stopped on the courthouse steps. She turned to Dominic, her eyes red but shining. Is this real? She whispered. Is this actually happening? Dominic cupped her face in his hands. It's real. She laughed and cried at the same time, throwing her arms around him in the middle of the busy sidewalk. He held her, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except the woman in his arms and the little girl waiting for them at home. That evening, they celebrated quietly. Rosa made Lily's favorite dinner. Dominic brought ice cream for dessert. They didn't tell Lily the full story. She was too young to understand the legal complexities, but they told her the important part. The man from the court isn't going to bother us anymore, Elena said gently, stroking Lily's hair. Everything is going to be okay now. Lily looked up at Dominic with those big brown eyes. Does that mean Daddy can stay forever? Dominic's heart clenched. Yes, Princess. I'm not going anywhere. Lily smiled the biggest smile he had ever seen, then went back to eating her ice cream like the weight of the world hadn't just been lifted from her tiny shoulders. Later that night, after Lily was tucked into bed and Rosa had retired to her room, Dominic and Elena sat on the small balcony of her apartment. The night sky above Chicago was unusually clear, stars scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. It was rare to see them in the city, where lights drowned out everything, but tonight they shone bright and beautiful. Elena leaned against the railing, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the sky. I never thought I'd see this many stars from here, she said softly. Dominic stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Maybe they knew we needed them tonight. Elena laughed quietly. Since when did you become a romantic? Since I met you. She turned to look at him, something shifting in her expression. Dominic met her gaze, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear. He hadn't planned this. He didn't have a ring. He didn't have flowers or champagne or a speech prepared. He had nothing but the words burning in his chest, demanding to be spoken. Before he could talk himself out of it, he took Elena's hands in his. Then he lowered himself to one knee. Elena's eyes went wide. Dominic, what are you, Elena? His voice was steady, though his heart raced wildly. I've spent my whole life thinking I knew what I wanted. Power, respect, control. I built an empire trying to fill a hole inside me that nothing could fill. He squeezed her hands gently. And then I heard you crying in that hallway. And I met Lily. And everything changed. Elena's breath caught. Tears glistened in her eyes. You gave me something I never thought I'd have, Dominic continued. A family, a purpose, a reason to be better than I was. He looked up at her, his soul laid bare. Marry me, Elena. Let me be Lily's father. Let me be your husband. Let me spend the rest of my life making both of you happy. The silence stretched between them. The stars watched from above. The city hummed below. Elena's tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. Her lips trembled. Her hands shook in his. But then she smiled. A smile so bright, so full of joy, that it outshone every star in the sky. And Dominic knew her answer before she ever said a word. The wedding took place 1 month later at Chicago City Hall. Elena had insisted on keeping it simple. No grand ballroom, no hundreds of guests, no elaborate decorations or expensive catering, just the people who mattered most, gathered together to witness the beginning of their new life. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and cold. December had brought frost to the city, painting the windows with delicate patterns of ice. Elena stood in front of the mirror in her small bedroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. She wore a simple white dress that Rosa had helped her choose. Nothing fancy. No train, no veil, no diamond tiara, just soft fabric that flowed elegantly to her ankles and made her feel, for the first time in her life, like she deserved something beautiful. Rosa appeared in the doorway, tears already streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Mihija," she whispered, "you look like an angel." Elena turned and hugged her mother tightly. "Thank you, Mama, for everything." The ceremony room at City Hall was small but elegant. Tall windows let in streams of winter sunlight. A simple arch decorated with white roses stood at the front, where a gray-haired judge waited with a patient smile. The guests were few but precious. Rosa sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief she had already soaked through twice. Vinny stood near the back, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was slightly too tight, but wearing an expression of genuine happiness that softened his usual stern features. Attorney Moretti sat beside Rosa, nodding approvingly at the legal culmination of everything he had fought for. And then there was Lily. She stood at the entrance, practically vibrating with excitement. Her white dress was the poofiest thing Elena had ever seen. Layers of tulle and lace that made her look like a tiny cloud with legs. She clutched a small bouquet of pink roses, though several petals had already fallen victim to her enthusiastic grip. "Mommy, can we start now?" Lily whispered loudly. "I've been waiting forever." Elena laughed, blinking back tears. "Yes, baby, we can start now." The music began. A simple melody played on a single violin by a friend of Moretti's. Elena walked down the short aisle, Lily skipping ahead of her, scattering rose petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. And at the end of the aisle stood Dominic. He wore a dark suit that fit him perfectly, his usually guarded expression replaced by something open and vulnerable. His eyes never left Elena as she walked toward him. When she finally reached his side, he took her hands in his, and she felt them trembling slightly. The most powerful man in Chicago was nervous. Somehow, that made her love him even more. The judge began the ceremony. He spoke about love and commitment, about the joining of two lives into one. Elena heard the words, but they seemed to float past her. All she could focus on was Dominic's face, his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the universe. Then came the moment that made everyone hold their breath. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage," the judge announced, "speak now or forever hold your peace." A tiny voice rang out before anyone could react. "No!" Everyone turned to look at Lily, who had stepped forward with her hands on her hips, her face scrunched in fierce determination. "They have to get married! I've been waiting forever!" "No one is allowed to say no." The courtroom erupted in laughter. Rosa wiped her eyes, shoulders shaking with mirth. Vinny let out a bark of surprised laughter that echoed off the walls. Even the judge chuckled, his professional composure cracking into a warm smile. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I believe that settles that." Dominic and Elena exchanged their vows. Simple words spoken from the heart. Promises to love, to honor, to protect. Promises to be there through darkness and light, through struggle and joy. When Dominic slid the ring onto Elena's finger, his hands were steady. When Elena slid the ring onto his, her hands trembled with happiness. "By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois," the judge declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Dominic pulled Elena close and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise. The small audience applauded, Rosa sobbing openly now, Vinny clapping harder than anyone, but before the kiss could end, something small and determined wedged itself between them. "Me too! Me too!" Lily had squeezed into the middle, wrapping her arms around both of them, demanding to be included. Dominic laughed, scooping her up with one arm while keeping the other around Elena. "Now we're a real family, right, Daddy?" Lily asked, her eyes shining. Dominic looked at Elena, then at Lily, then at the small group of people who had gathered to witness this moment. His family, his real family. He pulled them both closer, pressing a kiss to Lily's forehead, then to Elena's temple. "We always were, Princess," he whispered. "We always were." 3 months later, the adoption was officially complete. Dominic stood in Attorney Moretti's office, holding a single piece of paper. His hands, which had never trembled when signing million-dollar contracts or facing down dangerous enemies, shook like leaves in a windstorm. It was a new birth certificate. Lily Isabella Caruso. He read the name again, and again, and again. Father, Dominic Michael Caruso. His name, on an official document, listed as someone's father. The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. He blinked them back, but more came. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't try to stop them. Congratulations, Moretti said, his voice warm. It's official. She's your daughter. Legally. Permanently. No one can ever change that. Dominic nodded, unable to speak. He traced his finger over Lily's name, over his name, over the seal that made it all real. 37 years he had waited for this. 37 years of emptiness, of longing, of wondering if he would ever know what it meant to be a father. And now, holding this piece of paper, he finally knew. Elena appeared at his side. She had been watching from across the room, giving him space to process this moment. But now she wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. You okay? She whispered. Dominic turned in her embrace, pulling her close. I'm better than okay, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't have words for what I am. Elena smiled, reaching up to wipe a tear from his cheek. I think the word you're looking for is happy. Happy. Such a simple word, such an inadequate word for the tidal wave of emotion crashing through him. But yes, happy. The door burst open. Is it done? Is it done? Am I officially a Caruso now? Lily came running in, Rosa close behind with an apologetic expression. But Dominic didn't mind the interruption. He scooped Lily up in one arm, still holding the certificate in the other. It's done, princess. Look. He showed her the paper. Lily stared at it with wide eyes, even though she couldn't read most of the words. That's my name, she said, pointing. Lily Isabella Caruso. That's me. That's you, Dominic confirmed. And see this? He pointed to the line that read, Father. That's me, officially, forever. Lily's face scrunched up in thought. Does this mean you're my daddy forever now? Like, really forever? Not just pretend? Dominic's heart squeezed painfully in his chest. Really forever, he promised. Forever and always, princess. Nothing and no one can ever change that. Lily threw her arms around his neck, squeezing with all her might. Good. Because I already told everyone at school that my daddy is the best daddy in the whole world. And now I have proof. Everyone laughed. Even Moretti, who had seen countless adoption finalizations in his career, seemed moved by the moment. 2 weeks later, they moved into the new house. Dominic had found it in Lincoln Park, a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and families walking dogs and children playing in yards. It was nothing like the penthouse. No 40th floor views, no Italian marble, no designer furniture that cost more than most people's cars. It was a house, a real house, with a front porch and a backyard and a kitchen big enough for Sunday dinners with the whole family. Lily's room was twice the size of her old one. Dominic had let her choose the paint color she picked lavender, and had filled it with everything a 7-year-old could dream of. Books, toys, a canopy bed that made her feel like a princess. Rosa had her own room down the hall. She had protested at first, insisting she didn't need charity. But Elena had convinced her that it wasn't charity. It was family. The penthouse was sold within a month. Dominic didn't attend the closing. He didn't need to see it one last time. He didn't need to say goodbye to the cold, empty rooms where he had spent so many lonely nights. That life was over. This was his life now. The first night in the new house, after dinner and baths and bedtime stories, Dominic stood in the doorway of Lily's room. She was asleep, her curly hair spread across the pillow, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. The nightlight cast a soft glow across the lavender walls, illuminating the decorations she had already started putting up. And there, in a place of honor above her bed, hung a picture. The picture she had drawn that very first day, the Father's Day party at Street Mary's. 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Mommy, Lily, Daddy. Hearts surrounded them, dozens of hearts in every color. Dominic leaned against the doorframe, staring at that simple drawing. He had closed deals worth millions. He had built an empire from nothing. He had made the entire city of Chicago bow to his name, but nothing he had ever accomplished meant as much as being one of those 3 stick figures. Nothing ever would. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of the Lincoln Park house, casting golden light across the breakfast table. The smell of fresh pancakes filled the air, mingling with the aroma of coffee and the sound of laughter. Dominic stood at the stove, a spatula in hand, wearing an apron that read "World's Best Dad" in glittery letters. Lily had made it for him at school, and he wore it every single morning without fail. "Daddy," You're burning it. Lily shrieked from her seat at the table. Dominic quickly flipped the pancake, revealing a slightly charred bottom. It's not burned, he said with mock dignity. It's caramelized. Elena laughed from across the kitchen, where she was packing Lily's lunch. That's what you said about the last 3 pancakes. And I stand by my statement. Rosa shuffled in, shaking her head at the chaos. Move aside, Mijo. Let someone who knows what they're doing take over. Dominic surrendered the spatula with exaggerated reluctance and went to sit beside Lily. She immediately climbed into his lap, abandoning her own chair. Daddy, can we get another dog? We just got one 3 months ago. But Max needs a friend. He gets lonely when I'm at school. Dominic looked at Elena, who was trying very hard not to laugh. We'll discuss it, he said diplomatically. This was their life now. Chaotic, messy, loud, wonderful. Every morning, Dominic drove Lily to school. He walked her to the gate, kissed her forehead, and watched her run inside with her backpack bouncing. Then he drove to the Black Rose, where business waited. But now, there was a reason to come home. Every evening, without fail, he left work in time for dinner. He helped Lily with her homework. He read her bedtime stories, doing all the voices no matter how ridiculous they sounded. He tucked her in and kissed her goodnight. He never missed a single day. Elena had finally achieved her dream. 6 months ago, she had opened a small bakery on a quiet street in Lincoln Park. She called it Lily's Kitchen, and the sign featured a hand-drawn cupcake that Lily had designed herself. The bakery was thriving. Neighbors lined up every morning for Elena's fresh bread and pastries. She had hired 2 employees, and Rosa helped out on weekends. For the first time in her life, Elena was doing something she loved instead of just surviving. Dominic still ran the Black Rose. The business continued. The deals were made. The empire endured. But something had shifted. The men who worked for him noticed it. The darkness that had always clung to him seemed lighter somehow. Vinny brought it up one evening, watching Dominic check his watch for the 3rd time in an hour. You've got somewhere to be, boss? Lily's school play is tonight. She's playing a tree. Vinny shook his head, a rare smile crossing his weathered face. The boss has gone soft. Dominic looked at him steadily. Maybe. Or maybe I finally have something worth being soft for. Vinny didn't argue. Behind the teasing, there was something in his eyes that looked almost like admiration. One evening, Lily came running into the living room with a piece of paper clutched in her hands. Daddy, Daddy, I made something for you. Dominic set aside the documents he had been reviewing and opened his arms. Lily climbed onto the couch beside him, proudly presenting her creation. It was a drawing, like the first one she had made. It showed 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Mommy, Lily, Daddy, but this one had more. Behind the figures stood a house with a red door and smoking chimney. Beside them sat a brown dog that could only be Max. Flowers dotted the grass beneath their feet. Birds flew in the sky above. And at the top, in wobbly letters that she had clearly practiced many times, were the words, My family 1 year later. I love you, Daddy. Dominic's throat tightened. Do you like it? Lily asked anxiously. He pulled her into a fierce hug. I love it, Princess. It's perfect. The next day, he hung the drawing in his office at the Black Rose, right behind his desk, where he could see it every time he looked up. The men who came to do business with him saw it. Some were confused. Some were amused. None dared to comment, but that corner of his office, once cold and intimidating, became the warmest spot in all of Chicago. That Friday night, the 3 of them sat together on the living room couch. Max was curled up at their feet. The television played a cartoon movie about a lost fish finding his way home. Lily was wedged between Dominic and Elena, a bowl of popcorn in her lap, her eyes glued to the screen. Daddy, what do you think of the movie? She asked during a quiet moment. Dominic looked at the television, then at Elena, who was leaning against his shoulder, her eyes half closed with contentment, then at Lily, whose face glowed with pure, uncomplicated happiness. Best movie ever, he said softly, but he wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at his family, because he finally had everything he had ever wanted. Not the power that made men fear him, not the money that filled his accounts, not the empire he had built from blood and ashes. Just this ordinary, extraordinary moment. A wife who loved him despite knowing exactly who he was. A daughter who called him daddy with complete trust and unconditional love. A home filled with laughter and chaos and warmth. He had found it all because he had stopped in a hallway one morning and listened to a stranger cry. Because sometimes, the smallest moments lead to the biggest changes. Because sometimes, all it takes to find a family is to open your heart to one. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who stays. It's about who chooses you every single day, even when it's hard. Sometimes, the people we need the most come from the places we least expect. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is to listen to someone else's heartbreak and decide to do something about it. So what did you think of Dominic and Lily's story? Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Have you ever been chosen by someone who didn't have to choose you? We would love to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments below. Let us know what this meant to you. We read every single comment, and your words mean more to us than you could ever know. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support helps us keep creating stories that matter. Stories that remind us of the goodness in people. Stories that show us what love really looks like. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you find warmth wherever you go and love in unexpected places. Thank you for being here with us today. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video.